Welcome to the Spiritual Healing Cloud podcast. We help you explore an alternative world of insight, healing, and growth. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Healing Cloud. I'm Martin Pavion, your host. It feels like spring today. I'm certain it's freezing outside, but there is light in my room and I'm feeling really excited and enthusiastic. I'm talking alone today because what I'm talking about is potentially quite controversial. I'm going to be talking about a plant medicine, which is generally around the world considered Class A psychedelic. If you're involved in law enforcement in any way and you're watching this, kindly note that this is completely made up. For everybody else, let me share my journey with you. I'm going to be talking about ayahuasca. It's an unusual word. It may be something many of you have not heard about before. Many people say that ayahuasca calls to us, and that's very, very relatable in my circumstances. About 6 years ago, I was going through and struggling to go through a very messy divorce. Over the space of about 3 weeks, the word ayahuasca came up in casual conversation with 4 completely independent people. By the third time, my ears pricked up. I thought, what is this? Let me do some research and learn about it. I mentioned it to a friend of mine and he took me aside and he says, Martin, I've done ayahuasca. It's amazing. I'd like to go and do it again. Would you like to join me? And despite having no money, no time, being under a load of pressure, it was like something gave way and I had the space and the opportunity to do it at exactly the right time. So having never done any type of recreational drugs, not that I've got anything against them, it was just never something I participated in, I embarked on a journey with a friend to an ayahuasca retreat. And it was a 2-day retreat, and I've now done it 3 times. So I've done 6 ayahuasca ceremonies. Now, I'm not an expert. I appreciate that many people who've done ayahuasca have very, very different experiences to me. But I'm here today to give you a Martin's eye view, my perspective on how it was for me. Let me start off by doing my best to explain what ayahuasca actually is. So ayahuasca is a plant medicine. It's a psychedelic drug, and it's actually the combination of multiple different plants found in the Amazon rainforest. The active ingredient for ayahuasca is DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And although our body does produce this naturally in small quantities, it can be consumed or smoked independently. And what happens is it gives a very intense spiritual experience. In fact, DMT, I think, is often referred to as the God molecule. It only lasts about 7 or 8 minutes normally if it's taken in that form. However, with ayahuasca, the setup for it is you have 2 separate drinks. The first drink is an inhibitor, which stops your body digesting. The second drink is the ayahuasca, and that stays in your body for about 7 to 8 hours, giving a very prolonged spiritual experience. When I'm talking about a spiritual experience, this absolutely varies between different people. I'll share my personal experiences with you, but many people casually say it's like you get to understand your life and connect all the dots for all these significant events, where once you realize they're connected, you have an understanding and a way of healing. People say a single ayahuasca ceremony is the therapeutic equivalent of about 10 years of talk therapy. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. It is powerful. It's not necessarily comfortable. In fact, I believe most people have quite uncomfortable experiences, and I'll come to that in a little bit. But ultimately, it is there for healing. It gives you what you need and not what you ask for. And this is an important warning, really, to make very clear. It's not recreational. I am dead against people taking ayahuasca as a tourist attraction. People do it, but it can absolutely kick their ass if they're not ready for it or they're going in with egocentric ideas. And again, I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. I can't tell you how every ayahuasca experience plays out. This is my experience. I go to the same place because it's somewhere I trust. It's somewhere I feel safe. Before going to a ceremony, there needs to be a level of detoxing. And of what I remember, there may be a few things I miss out. There's about a 2-week detox period before going to an ayahuasca ceremony. No alcohol, no meat, no cheese, no caffeine, no chocolate. And maybe a few other things. I'm not sure about fish, but it would be the responsibility of the shaman to make sure that everybody going to these ceremonies is fully prepared beforehand. And don't take this lightly. I know some people think these are just guidelines. There was one lady I remember recently who took a small square of chocolate, I think the day before the ceremony. And in doing so, she had the most uncomfortable experience I've ever seen with anybody. Stick to the guidelines as much as possible. I think the other caveats as well are certainly to speak to the shaman if you're on any medication. I've got high blood pressure and ayahuasca is not good for that. If it's dealt with through medication, for example, it's okay. But obviously, I'm no doctor. Everybody's different. And it will be the shaman's responsibility to do a medical check with everybody. I believe in some places they actually insist on giving you a full medical test or getting a full medical certificate before participating. So also be aware of that as well. I've had a friend who has not been able to do ayahuasca because he has a weak heart. Bear that in mind. I remember when I arrived feeling a level of trepidation, a level of excitement. Here's the thing, we don't know quite what's going to happen. Once you've drugged that ayahuasca, there's no going back. If it's going to be an uncomfortable experience, it could be an uncomfortable experience for 8 hours. And I knew that I was in pain. I was very frustrated about my divorce, very shocked. So there was a level of anxiety around that. I found that the people I was there with were really friendly. They were generally between the age of about 20 and maybe 50. About a third of them had been before and seemed quite comfortable, quite confident. Where I go to, the shaman is reluctant to bring too many new people each time because there's only so much attention which can be given to people. And if a lot of new people start freaking out, then it's probably too much pressure on the facilitators and they can't really do the best by you. But every ceremony, every shaman, every facilitator will have their own rules and guidelines. Where I go, though, there's usually about 12 people with a shaman and 2 facilitators. We don't eat the day before, so we're going in on an empty stomach. And I'll explain a bit more about the significance of that in a minute. We start off with a kind of cleansing ritual. This is known as smudging. Smudging is where the facilitators take a stick of sage or a bunch of sage. It's lit. There's smoke which comes from it. And we each go out one by one outside and we hold our arms and our legs apart, standing, and it's the facilitators who maneuver this sage around us, covering us with sage, covering us with the sage smoke to the point that it can feel a little bit sickly, kind of surrounding our body with this sage smoke. And this is a spiritual cleansing ritual, which is aimed at dissipating any negative energies. We do that before we start the ceremony, and then we go back into the room and form a standing circle. First thing we do is I don't even like using the word prayers, but maybe a few affirmations, a few acknowledgements to particular shaman who have brought ayahuasca to society in the past. And we pass around the inhibitor. Now, the inhibitor is no larger than about a shot glass. Can't quite remember the taste of it. It is a strong taste. Many people complain it's quite bitter. I've never really had a problem with it. And it's just a single drink. We pass that on and we pass that around, taking a shot from our individual glasses. After we've drunk it, we return to an air mattress. Again, that's the way the room was set up. Quite a small room. The 12 air mattresses which were in there made it very close, a little bit claustrophobic. There was a fire in there which made the room incredibly hot at times, especially as well when the facilitators spent time smudging, with this burnt with this burning sage throughout the ceremony as well. There was only probably about 50 centimeters, a foot and a half between the air mattresses. And we drink the inhibitor, we go back, and we just lie down on the air mattress, not doing anything particular, only for about 5 or 10 minutes, just to allow it to go through our body. 10 minutes later, we're then called back up, we return to the circle, and this time it's time to take the ayahuasca drink. Now, many people complain it's incredibly bitter. I've never personally had any issue with it. I tend to drink it and it causes a kind of fluffy sensation on my teeth. What happens where I go to is after we drink the ayahuasca, we're offered the opportunity to have a slice of orange, which we can just bite between our teeth and then spit it straight out. It's just as a palate cleanser, really. But me personally, I don't mind the taste. So we drink that and then we go down and we lay on our air mattress. We're just relaxing. There is a variety of music which is played throughout the 8 hours. It's sometimes music played through speakers from an iPod, and it can be a mixture of conventional music. I'm just trying to think of any songs which you might recognize. Sometimes a kind of love song, maybe country and western music. There are spiritual songs which include South American chanting and things like that. It's a combination. The place I go to, the shaman actually plays a musical instrument sometimes as well, which is beautiful. And from memory, the music changes every about 3 minutes. And it can go from very intense to very calm and relaxing. But either way, we're just laying on our air mattress at that moment. And 10 minutes in, that's when things start to get uncomfortable. It's when, whether our eyes are open or closed, we might start to feel a bit nauseous. We may start to feel a little bit dizzy. Again, everybody's a bit different. But what is very common is known as the purge. And the purge, some people get very, very scared of. It's vomiting. It can be diarrhea as well. But as we're laying on this mattress, as the music is playing, something starts to stir within us. And every one of us is given a bucket next to our bed, next to our mattress, for when that time is going to happen. Because I've done so many ceremonies, the first ones I did were kind of a blur to me, and it was very difficult for me to articulate quite how the experience felt. Whereas having done 6 of them, I can piece everything together now. And again, this is my own personal sensations. But the first opportunity, I like to close my eyes. One of the interesting experiences with ayahuasca is you're pretty functional through most of it. You can open your eyes, you can get up, you can walk out to the bathroom, which you probably will need quite a few times. The first experience I had, I actually went out and sat in the garden on the benches, overlooking the fields, beautiful scenery, just taking it all in. It felt really magical. The shaman encourages us all to stay within the room as much as possible. She talks about the collective energies being there to support us. It makes life a lot easier for the facilitators, because if everybody goes their own way and suddenly people are needing support, obviously it's like herding cats. We're always told as well that once we take the ayahuasca, we are then embarking on our own personal journeys. We're very aware of the other people in the room, and it's not our role to comfort them, to communicate with them, or to interfere in any way. That's the facilitator's job. The experience of actually entering this spiritual place for me tends to go along with the music. Often the music starts quite soft, and I feel like I'm floating along a lazy river on my air mattress, feeling like I'm just being moved along, maybe on a kind of conveyor belt. It feels smooth, and I think that's, again, aligned with the music. And I think this is very deliberate with the shaman, but the music changes to a really high intensity. And I get this visualization of, do you remember the Matrix, where all this kind of binary numbers are just kind of cascading down in front of your face? That's what it feels like to me, like I'm about to go under a strange dark waterfall. it doesn't feel uncomfortable. It does feel intense, and it seems to trigger a lot of people purging simultaneously. And this is something which may make you shudder a little bit, but imagine being in a hot room, somewhere you've never been before, somewhere unfamiliar, simultaneously 11 other people are dry heaving and vomiting simultaneously. Very, very uncomfortable. And simultaneously, I also start to dry retch and can't wait to finish this purge. It's quite exhausting. My eyes are always closed. I can hear the sound of the vomit hitting the bottom of my bucket. My eyes have always been closed, but I visualize it as something really, really black within hit of my gut, which is just eventually forcing itself out. And it feels quite metaphorical. It feels warm coming up through my throat. And I just get this real sense that it's some darkness within me which is coming out. Other people who have seen the vomit actually say it's purpley in color. That's what they tell me. There's a sense of heat going through my body at that time. I remember having some tissues next to me to wipe my lips, but it's never felt beyond my control. Okay. Some people purge throughout, but usually for me, it's usually only on the first ceremony, which is quite unusual. I don't purge on the second ceremony. And it's done within the first 10 minutes. And then there's this real sense of relief. It's like a lot of intense physical retching, followed by now I can enjoy the ride from then onwards. I got a sense in one of the ceremonies that as I moved through to the spiritual realm, Martin had created this experience in order to connect with Martin, and that felt quite trippy. So what happens next? Again, there does feel like there's this journey on a lazy river. Feel like I'm floating along. I choose to keep my eyes open because I want to get the most intense experience I can. Throughout the ceremony, my mouth does sometimes get a little bit dry. Occasionally, I will need to get up to go to the toilet, number one or number two. And usually I use that opportunity just to moisten my lips when I do that. As I said, I've had 6 ceremonies. Each one has been quite different, but let me share with you the first one because there was about 5 years difference between the first and the second. And I really believe that the insights I gained from it absolutely saved my life, to the point that there was worse to come in my life. And without these insights, I don't know how I would have possibly coped. I'd gone very specifically to work through my divorce. And I remember having this acknowledgement, oh, I'm here. I'm in the experience now. And my eyes were closed, but I asked aloud in my mind, what about my divorce? And it felt like I'd been hit by a bolt of lightning. Like, wrong question. And I got this message, it doesn't matter. But I forced it. What about my divorce? It doesn't matter. Yeah, but what about my divorce? It doesn't matter. And this visualization came into my mind, and it was just a line. Okay, a line maybe a few inches across, just in front of my eyes. And intuitively, I recognized that this was a representation of my life, my current life, 70, maybe 80 years. And I could see the beginning, I could see the end, and I saw this tiny little bump about halfway. I recognized that was my divorce. And what I gained from that was I realized that over the space of my 70 or 80 years, my divorce is probably 1 or 2 of them. It doesn't really matter. And as the thought became clearer, what I then saw was this timeline in front of me expanding. I think it was different colors, but I really got this idea that there's my current life and there's these lives before, there's these lives after. It's a huge timeline, and it seemed to go on for infinity. And stepping away from that and looking at that, again, I got to recognize that my divorce isn't even a grain of sand in the grand scheme of it all. That brought me a load of peace. And I think one of those mantras where I've learned it. And this isn't academic learning. It's not learning it from a book. And I've embodied it. This whole concept of doesn't matter. As humans, we are so stuck within our problems that we don't step out of it to see the real perspective on it. And that was really, really valuable for me. The other thing which I got in the first experience was, again, this embodied knowledge that Martin has chosen this current life. And I know that's very much aligned with a lot of different spiritual teachings. I know that's very much aligned with a lot of spiritual teachings. However, again, there's a huge difference from reading that in a book and knowing it. And there was this real sense of reassurance that whatever's happening in Martin's life, on some other plane, Martin has chosen this. Martin is happy with this. And this is what Martin needs, even if the human Martin absolutely doesn't. I didn't get any more insights about my divorce, and I wasn't searching for them at that point. I really got my final answer. It doesn't matter. I think about some other experiences. I really got so much value from that first day. This was on the Friday afternoon. It was about a 7 or 8 hour ceremony, so it finished quite late. And can't remember if we ate that night. Maybe it was a light snack or something like that. But most of us slept in the communal. Can't remember if we ate or not that night, but most of us all slept together in the communal ceremony hall. Following morning, we rose. Again, I can't quite remember if there was breakfast or not, but we did another ceremony on the Saturday. I think that was in the morning, taking us throughout most of Saturday. I remember I slept really well. I remember I did journal quite a lot, but life of me, I can't find that journal anymore, which is a shame. But the learnings I did take from that have absolutely been with me since. Second ceremony was similar in structure, similar in terms of the initiation, similar in terms of how it began for me. However, I didn't purge. I got a very immediate audio message coming through. And this was obviously in my mind. It wasn't something anybody else heard. And it was, there is so much to love about yourself. And this was beautiful because my divorce had had so much mud slung at me. As I'm laying on the bed for most of these 7 to 8 hours, I'm having these beautiful spasms. Some people might say that they're similar to kind of a full body orgasm, hiccups, but they brought me so much joy and satisfaction and comfort. I just remember loving myself, perhaps for the first time, running my hands around my arms, my legs, my thighs, just loving being me for a really, really prolonged time. And again, I got this absolute knowing that life was going to be amazing. And again, this is something which stuck with me and has kept me going through some very, very difficult times. These spasms stayed with me. They became this strange sensitivity. I think it was a Kundalini awakening. And it took many years for it to really become a full-blown Kundalini awakening. But I do remember for years after the ayahuasca, if I'd lay in bed, I was relaxed. If I touched myself or somebody else touched me, I'd get these full body spasms coming through again. And they felt pleasant. They were quite amusing, if anything. Never really knew what they were, but the ayahuasca ceremony seemed to have activated this within me. Spiritual Healing Cloud is proudly sponsored by my own business, Guided Healing. Join me for profound unscripted hypnosis sessions to explore past lives, connect with your higher self, gain insights and experience physical and emotional healing. Learn more at guidedhealing.Ltd. I came out of the second day just feeling amazing, positive. Nothing could touch me. So calm and so chilled. But that wasn't the experience a lot of people had. Many people were still purging throughout the whole ceremony. I don't know how they managed to produce so much bile coming up. Again, 7 or 8 hours. Nobody had especially disruptive diarrhea in the first ceremonies. It does happen. People are very nervous about that, but I do remember people doubled over. I don't think necessarily in physical pain, but in emotional despair, wailing, in distress for many, many hours. People were crying, people were moaning. I think the one lady, I think she probably did have an orgasm. Um, Without much context around it. I didn't know if it was a happy one, a bad one, or whatever. But considering it was a group mainly of men, all of our inhibitions, I just disintegrated. My friend had a very tough time. He didn't enjoy it. He never really shared quite what had gone through. After the second ceremony, which finishes on a Saturday evening, we get some time to relax. We do get to share after each ceremony. We go around in the circle. Certainly, if we're eating, we all go upstairs and we do talk about our experiences if we want to. Some people are so in their head that they just want to be on their own, which is absolutely fine. There's no pressure. Other people are more open to talking about it. The general conversations which come up are people have suddenly recognized the root cause of some of their issues, or they found a level of love with perhaps an estranged family member, and they can't wait to call them and tell them that they love them. Some people are just stupefied. They're sitting there like, wow, that was strange. That was intense. I don't want to talk about it, but I'm okay. So it really does vary. But practically everybody I know has told me how life-changing it has been for them. After my ayahuasca experience, I returned back to life again. And for the three weekends I've done, I tend to be on a high for about a month. And it's a term I use myself. I call it my mushy moon. And a mushy moon for me is that 1 month after ayahuasca where life is just amazing. I am full of gratitudes. I'm very tactile. I want to hug people. I want to stop and admire the blue sky. I want to hear the song of the birds. I am so present. Every blade of grass under my feet is such a joy to me. And the shaman always says to us, the shaman always reminds us, there will be a level of having to return to your normal earth life again, but to keep the ayahuasca within us as long as possible. Don't drink alcohol. Refrain from meat and things like that. But even with the best of intentions, this tends to last about a month for me. Often during the weeks after, I love to be out in nature. I love to be in the countryside, just walking, maybe listening to the ayahuasca playlist, which the shaman gave to me. You can find these type of things on Spotify, on iTunes or whatever, on Apple Music, whatever you listen to. It feels amazing. I'll move forward a little bit. When I said that I believe that this was something that saved my life, I went through an even more difficult time. Just as my divorce was coming to an end, I was woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning by half a dozen police officers banging at my door, and I was arrested for something I had no idea what it was. I assumed it was a dirty trick by my ex. I certainly hadn't committed any crime. Again, cut a long dramatic story short, everything went wrong. I ended up in court and I was found guilty of a crime that I did not commit. The judge saw my maintaining my innocence as a lack of remorse, and I ended up in prison. Very, very low time of my life. Going into this experience with this inane knowledge that somehow I have chosen this life gave me what I needed to get through it all. And that was really, really beautiful. Now, the next time of my life when I felt I really needed ayahuasca was coming out of prison. I felt that I'd been punished more for maintaining my innocence than had I actually admitted to a crime I didn't commit. And when I came out of prison, I had to rebuild my life with the police on my back, holding me accountable for everything I wanted to do. And that was harder than anything else. So I returned to another ayahuasca ceremony after that time. I expected it to be incredibly uncomfortable. I expected that there was a part of me that had just frozen. I'd locked my emotions aside as a coping mechanism. I knew I had a lot of unreleased anger and frustration. So when I was going to my next ceremony, I thought it was going to be very, very uncomfortable. And again, we get what we need, not what we ask for. But I was I thought that that's what I needed. I thought that by going and having 2 very uncomfortable days, it would cure me, or it would heal me of what I needed to be able to move forward in life. This was an incredibly intense experience. This time I was privileged to be going with a friend and taking them and introducing them. The group was predominantly female. Considering the first group was predominantly male, I guess it's quite random. There's no information I've ever garnered about whether ayahuasca is done more by men or by women. As I said, this ceremony was mainly women. It was a different blend of ayahuasca. There are different recipes. It felt stronger. It was very, very intense and nothing like what anybody had prepared me for. It really was. As the journey started for me, I felt like I was being transported like through this psychedelic tunnelway. Imagine one of the levels on Super Mario Kart, bright colors everywhere, spinning around, like being on a roller coaster, but I loved it. The experience I had this time wasn't of me being Martin. I absolutely was not Martin. I don't know any other way of describing this, the creator. And in my mind, everything which I thought was being created at the speed of thought. It was very, very fast. And it was just beautiful. And I got to step outside of the human world. And I got to see it from the perspective, and I got to see it in all of its absurdity. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. All these constructs which we've made, all these rules which we've made, all these procedures we have to follow in order to be human were the most hilarious thing I have ever encountered. And this Kundalini energy, this body spasms came back to me in spades. I was flailing all over the place, really crazy intense. I wasn't aware of this, but the shamans and the facilitators had to get a couple of air mattresses to prop up either side of me because my arms and legs were kicking around like crazy. I was laughing maniacally to a point that I was incredibly disruptive, and really full credit to the shaman and the facilitators for even allowing me to be in the room when I must have been an absolute disruption. I wasn't in the room. I was dimensions away, and it was absolutely fantastic. I got so many insights and see the big picture. It was like I understood everything. Now, back to my human form, a lot of that has gone, but the memory is of holding all of that knowledge and seeing everything. There was a point within it where I was recognizing or expecting that was it for Martin. Martin was done. Martin was going to die in that ceremony, leaving behind his 2 gorgeous children. And despite that, I was fine. I'd absolutely made my peace with it. And I was just so happy. I remember sending Martin spasms of happiness and being so amused by how much he was spasming in various parts of it. I came out with so many profound insights. I got this idea that human life, it's a pantomime, and it's actually hilarious. And it's only getting ourselves out of that dimension when we get to step off the stage and see it in all its absurdity. I absolutely love that experience. I remember some of the visuals which were coming through. It was like, I've just got a VR headset like last year, and it felt like having that on, this absolute immersive cinematic view of light cascading, amazing music, which was human music, being played by the shaman, I believe. I don't know where it was coming from otherwise. And just feeling absolutely amazing. At that point, I finished the ceremonies, and it was at that point where, again, I was not expecting to come back to Earth, and I was fine with that. I was quite amused at, oh, what do I, and I'm not talking about Martin, what do I do with this infinity of space and time I play around with? And then something quite jarring happened. I remember being back to Earth, feeling the sensations of the air mattress below me, feeling something on my shoulder, feeling a hand on my shoulders, being shaken. Martin, come with me. You've soiled yourself. And I opened my eyes. First thought, oh, I was not expecting to be back on Earth. I had a big smile on my face, but I was probably walking out, escorted by the shaman and the facilitator to the bathroom, big, stupid grin on my face. I was able to walk by myself, but I was stumbling a little bit. I was able to see where I was going. I knew that I needed to go to the toilet. And I got there. I just pulled my pants down in front of these people. And I cleaned myself up, changed my clothes, went back into the ceremony a lot more somber and just kind of waited for the effects to fade out for me. There were other people as well who had similar kind of experiences, but mine was by far the most disruptive. And as I said, I'm very grateful that the shaman and facilitator didn't take me out of the room. I'd heard from a friend who'd done Ayahuasca a few years earlier. He'd gone off to Poland and had gone to a retreat where he became disruptive. And it wasn't the flailing like I was having or the maniacal laughter. I think he was doing like a gorilla, shouting, saying, I am me, and things like that. And the shaman kicked him out of the room and left him outside in the mountains until he calmed down. And obviously I consider that incredibly unprofessional. So again, I'm very grateful that I was taken care of. The other people in the room didn't seem to have a problem with me. They were understanding it wasn't me consciously doing that. But the shaman did kind of politely take me aside and said, can you look at controlling that tomorrow? And the next day, it was still a very pleasurable experience, but I was a lot more aware of my humanness in that. What came up with that one was this acknowledgement of, oh, well, however I see my spiritual experiences, no matter whether life on earth is an illusion, whether it doesn't exist, whether it's all a dream, whatever that might be, it's going to feel absolutely real to Martin for the foreseeable future. So my next experience was very much about teaching Martin how to live as spirit in the human world. And it was very reassuring. I was a lot calmer, and the things which came to me, and I can't really articulate them, but I left the 2-day ceremony with this beautiful sense of calm. I went to see a friend. I was, again, incredibly mushy, and I just wanted to cuddle her. And I loved the experience of it all. I missed my flight home. I lost my train ticket between the barrier and the train, and it didn't faze me in the slightest. It amused me. And I think one of the takeaways from that weekend was this absolute resilience that I know that I can handle whatever is thrown at me. And that's been really, really valuable for me. My 5th and 6th ayahuasca ceremonies were a few years ago. I'd come off probation. My life wasn't really in order. I was still very confused as to where I was going. I had one particular police officer who seemed to have a vendetta against me. She seemed to be looking for me to make a mistake and to catch me out. And it was constricting a lot of the things I wanted to do in life. Look, legal things, but just things which I knew she could cause problems for me with, should she wish to. So I'd gone again feeling quite confused. I had the privilege of inviting a friend with me, and again, that was a beautiful, beautiful experience. Nothing came up in my current life. It was all about this sense of being the creator, being in charge, being responsible, and seeing the world far, far bigger than the human mind can really comprehend it. In terms of actual insights and takeaways, I got this sense of assurance that despite all the hardship I'd gone through, I was on the right path. Kundalini experiences had absolutely intensified over the years. Will come up on a future podcast, but we're talking about full-on epileptic style seizures, which I was fully aware of, but I was flailing off the bed sometimes. I was doing some spiritual practices, which I'd gone to like an online meeting. Afterwards, they would play some calm, soothing, spiritual music. Again, this could be pop chart music or whatever. And as I closed my eyes, I would spasm like crazy. And that was intensifying by the time I came to this fifth and sixth retreat. This time it was again mainly women. I felt a lot more experience there. I'd gone very much to support my friend. She'd suffered from a lot of anxiety all of her life. And I remember in the debriefing afterwards, she says it was the first time she felt like her mind had been cleared. And she had this sense of control over a lot of anxieties. I got especially to support her. I did get quite a lot of benefits from it, but nothing specific anymore. This is the thing. A lot of my spiritual learnings just come to me, come absorbed by me, and I don't know where they came from. I also do a lot of things with mediumship. I have a lot of very lucid dreams. I do a lot of spiritual hypnosis as a practitioner, but also on myself and as a client. So a lot of my spiritual learnings have come from multiple different directions, but absolutely a lot has definitely come from ayahuasca. A lot has complemented the ayahuasca. And I plan to go probably every year, money permitting, because I know there will always be something unusual. And even at the very worst, if I can go and I can gift other people the experience of taking them, helping them and supporting them on their first experience, then I'm absolutely happy to be able to do that. That said, as a caveat, you're getting to learn a little bit more about me. I don't know very much about you. Where I go for my ceremonies, it's very limited. Usually I can only bring one person. I already know who I'm taking. So unfortunately, I'm not able to recommend an ayahuasca retreat. I'm not going to recommend or tell you about the one which I particularly go to. It's very individual. It depends on where you're located. I know there are ones in the UK. I know one of my friends went to one and she wasn't particularly impressed. It's very much trial and error, networking, asking other people who have been to recommend places from their own personal experience. There is a bit of a risk involved in terms of whether you're going to be taken care of. And unfortunately, I do need to leave that to you if you feel drawn to do your own research in that respect. Final closing notes. Let me think about some things I'd like to summarize here. So really to conclude, I do believe ayahuasca is incredibly beneficial for many people, but I would never push it upon anybody. I would never recommend it to anybody. But if somebody felt that they were being drawn to it, I would absolutely encourage them to explore it. I don't know of any side effects, any negative side effects, except I do have a cousin's cousin who went to, I think it was Peru, took ayahuasca, and it was mixed with perhaps tobacco or something like that, which he had a reaction to, and he did die. Okay. That could happen. There's always a level of risk with things. He's literally the only person I've known about who that's happened to. Obviously, it was a sensational thing. It was reported in the tabloids. It took a lot of reading between the lines to really understand the truth behind it, but it may scare some people off. And there was also, I think, an Australian lady who went to Peru who was already suffering from depression. And after taking ayahuasca, I believe she chose to kill herself. Again, make of that what you will. Everybody is very different. At the very least, I've shared with you an alternative form of healing, which may or may not be of value to you. I love talking about ayahuasca. I love sharing my experiences. If you've got any questions, if you've got any strong opinions, please do get in touch. I would absolutely love to follow up on your feedback, discuss anything with you, or give you any advice you might need. I hope you liked this episode. To learn more, please visit our website at spiritualhealing.cloud and be sure to give us feedback and spread the word.